I'm 29 years old, and I still smell like plaster dust and linseed oil at my parents' dinner table. It's a familiar feeling, being the only person here who is physically tired. My knuckles are raw from stripping paint off a 19th century mahogany newel post, and I'm pretty sure there's a smear of wood stain on my temple. I'm still in my work clothes, a heavy canvas apron thrown in the trunk of my truck because I didn't have time to go back to my tiny apartment to change. I raced across Boston from the Beacon Hill job site, battling Friday traffic, just to make it in time for this mandatory Sunday dinner. My sister, Chloe, is sitting opposite me. She smells like expensive, bookish perfume, something with sandalwood and old paper. At 26, she's in the seventh year of her PhD in classics, and she's dressed in what I call curated poverty chic. It's a $300 linen blouse that's artfully wrinkled to look like she just rolled out of a university library carol, where she was, as she loves to say, interrogating the text. My mother, Eleanor, picks at her salmon, the wild-caught $30 a pound salmon that I, naturally, paid for with the rest of the week's groceries. She works part-time at an art gallery in the South End, a job that seems to consist entirely of drinking white wine at openings and lamenting the commercialization of the form. At the head of the table, my father, Richard, is holding court. He's pouring a Cabernet that costs more than my monthly utility bill. He hasn't had a real estate license in 3 years, not since the market restructured and he opted for an early retirement, which is a poetic way of saying his brokerage collapsed, taking most of his pride with it. But here, at this table, in this house I am paying for, he still plays the patriarch. The nuance of the agora in late-stage Athenian democracy is it's completely misunderstood by modern critics, Chloe is saying. Her boyfriend, a silent, bearded man named Todd, who is also predictably a PhD student, nods slowly, as if she's just cured a disease. Brilliant, honey, my father says, swirling his wine. That's the kind of analysis that gets you noticed. You have to use your head. The world is run by ideas. I feel a familiar, cold numbness creep up my spine. It's the feeling I get every time I'm in this room. I am the ghost at the feast. I am the provider, the financial engine, the walking, talking ATM. But I am not part of the conversation. My world, a world of physical labor, of tangible results, of saving beautiful historical things from rot and decay, is invisible to them. My work is dirty. It involves my hands. In this family, that's a polite way of saying it's a failure. I am a historical restoration specialist. I run a small, one-woman operation, and I am good at it. I bring things back to life. But to my family, I'm just a glorified carpenter. I'm the daughter who works, the one who is good with her hands, which they say with a faint, tragic air, as if I'd been born with a learning disability. And how was your week, Maya? My mother asks, her gaze flickering to me for the first time. It's the obligatory question. It was good, I say, my voice sounding rough, even to me. We started pulling up the flooring on the Beacon Hill project, found some original 1840s parquet hidden under 3 layers of linoleum and plywood. It's going to be incredible once we refinish it. My father lets out a short, unimpressed huff. Right. Lots of dust. Chloe smiles at me, a tight, patronizing little smile. That's so quaint, Maya. It's like you have a little hobby. A hobby. A hobby that has paid the $4,200 a month mortgage on this rambling, overpriced Chestnut Hill house for 3 straight years. A hobby that pays for their groceries, their wine, their car insurance, and the endless stream of research materials Chloe requires. My take-home pay is around $85,000 a year, which is respectable. But after I pay all their bills, I live on about $32,000 in a tiny studio apartment above a bakery in Somerville. I look at my hands on the table. They're stained and scarred. My nails are short, and the cuticles are cracked. I look at Chloe's hands,
which are pale and perfect, gesturing gracefully as she talks about her upcoming symposium. The numbness in my chest is solidifying, turning into something cold and heavy like lead. I'm so tired. I'm tired of the smell of plaster dust. I'm tired of being invisible. And I'm so tired of paying for people who look right through me. Chloe clears her throat, placing her perfect hands on the table. She has that glow. It's the glow she gets right before she's about to ask for an investment in her future. She looks first to our father, the dethroned king, and then she looks directly at me, the jester who pays the bills. "So," she says, her voice bright and hopeful. "So," Chloe begins, and the wattage of her smile brightens the room. "So, I've been selected by Professor Albright to join an advanced research trip to Greece this summer." "Oh, darling," my mother Eleanor gasps, her hands flying to her chest. "That's wonderful." "It's a 3-week intensive," Chloe continues, gaining steam, her eyes shining with academic fervor. "We'll be accessing the private archives at the National Library in Athens and then doing an on-site survey of pre-Hellenistic ruins in Crete. It's the kind of trip that defines a dissertation. It's where careers are made." My father, Richard, nods, his expression one of profound paternal wisdom. He leans back, steepling his fingers. "Exactly. This is the big league, Chloe. This is the moment you separate yourself from the pack. It's a critical investment." Investment. There's that word. The word they use when they mean Maya's money. I feel the muscles in my jaw tighten. I'm already calculating. A 3-week trip to Greece, flights, hotels, site fees, modest academic stipends. I'm running the numbers and they're not pretty. "It's such an amazing opportunity," Chloe says, her voice becoming a little softer, a little more careful. This is the pivot. And the university, of course, covers the basics, but there are associated costs. The specialized archival access, the intra-island travel, the materials. It's a modest $10,000. $10,000. The number just hangs in the air, shimmering over the half-eaten salmon. I stop breathing. $10,000. That is 2.5 months of mortgage payments on this house. It is the down payment on a new work truck. Something from this decade, something that doesn't threaten to die at every single red light. It's the high-capacity HEPA filtration system my workshop desperately needs, the one that I've been putting off buying for a year because my lungs are apparently less important than Chloe's research. It's my entire, painstakingly rebuilt emergency fund. Silence. My mother is beaming. My father is nodding. Chloe's boyfriend, Todd, is just staring at his plate, as usual. And all 3 of them, Mom, Dad, and Chloe, are looking at me. Not asking, just looking, expecting. It's my cue. I am supposed to smile, say, "Wow, Chloe, of course," and then mentally rearrange my next 6 paychecks. But the words don't come. That cold, leaden thing in my gut is twisting. I finally put my fork down, the tink of metal on ceramic sounding impossibly loud in the silence. I'm not sure what to say. It's a lot of money, Chloe. The atmosphere in the room changes instantly. It's like I just cursed in church. Chloe's face falls, her expression crumbling into one of profound theatrical hurt. My mother's smile tightens, her eyes narrowing. "Maya, honestly," Eleanor says, her voice sharp. "This is her future. This is a career-defining opportunity. It's an investment." "What about my future?" The words are out before I can stop them. They just escape. "What about my business? I need equipment. I'm trying to save. I'm trying to build something too." Chloe lets out a small, wounded sound. "This isn't equipment, Maya. This is my life's work." "It's a $10,000 trip," I say, And the numbness is burning off, replaced by a cold, sharp anger I haven't let myself feel in years. That's that's a lot of money, Chloe. That's a lot of money. Maya, my father's voice cuts through the room like a razor. He hasn't raised it. He doesn't need to. It's the voice he used when he was a high-powered broker, the one that could kill a deal or a person with a single word. He sets his wine glass down on the table with a heavy, deliberate thud. He sets his wine glass down on the table. Let's be realistic here, he says, his eyes locking onto mine. There are different roles in this family. We all contribute in our own way. He gestures with an open palm toward his sister. Chloe is the head. She is brilliant. She deals in ideas, in strategy, in the kind of intellectual work that shapes the world. Her career requires serious.
Chloe is studying her perfect, pale cuticles. Even Todd looks uncomfortable. The hands. It's not just an insult. It's a classification. It's my entire life, my 80-hour work weeks, my skill, my passion, my business, all of it reduced to a set of tools. Tools to be used. Tools to fund the real work, the important work, the work of the head. The shock is so profound, so absolute, that it's almost clarifying. The lead in my stomach turns to ice. The fog of obligation, of family guilt, of just wanting them to be proud of me, it all evaporates. I see them. I see this entire twisted, parasitic dynamic with perfect, crystalline clarity. I look at my father, the man who hasn't earned a paycheck in 3 years, who just defined my entire existence as a service function for his brilliant daughter. I pick up my fork. I look at my hands, the ones he just named, the ones with the cracked knuckles and the wood stain under the nails. I look back at him. My voice is so quiet I can barely hear it. The hands, I say. Is that what I am? He nods, taking a sip of his wine. It's a simple fact, Maya. You're the daughter who works. She's the daughter who thinks. If you don't like it, well, the door is right there. The sound of my father's wine glass touching the oak table echoes in the ringing silence. The hands. The door is right there. And in that moment, the entire 3-year charade flashes before my eyes, not as a memory, but as a receipt, a long, itemized bill for services rendered. It didn't start all at once. It never does. It started 3 years ago, with a phone call. My father, his voice thick with a forced, jovial tone that I now recognize as pure panic. His high-end real estate brokerage in Back Bay had folded. The market had turned, and a few bad investments had wiped him out. He'd lost his license. He was taking an early retirement to reevaluate and launch a new venture. I was 26. I had just landed my first major restoration contract on a historic brownstone. I was proud, I was solvent, and I was, as I'd been all my life, the responsible one. Just for a few months, Maya, he said. Just the mortgage payment. I can't let us lose the house. It's the only real asset we have left. Just until I get this new consulting gig off the ground. Just the mortgage payment. On a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house in Chestnut Hill, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Massachusetts. A house they bought at the peak of the market, a house that was a monument to their intellectual and social superiority, $4,200 a month. And I, the hands, said yes, because that's what hands do. They fix, they build, they support. I was so desperate for his approval, so desperate to be seen as more than just the artistic one who was good with tools, that I signed up to be their savior. That one payment, that just for a few months, turned into 36 consecutive payments, an entire 3-year mortgage paid by me. But it didn't stop there. About 6 months in, the consulting gig hadn't materialized. That was when my mother, Eleanor, called. Honey, it's just the property tax bill. It completely blindsided us. Could you just cover this one? Richard is so stressed. I'm worried about his health. Another $12,000. Then it was the utilities. Then the house account at the expensive organic grocer, because Mom insisted she couldn't abide by the pesticides at a normal supermarket. Then it was Chloe's conference fees for a trip to Chicago. Then her vital research materials, which always seemed to include $400 textbooks and a new laptop. I keep meticulous records. It's the only way a small business owner survives. I know exactly what this has cost me. The mortgage is $50,400 a year. The property taxes are $12,000. The groceries, utilities, car insurance, and miscellaneous family expenses average another $1,500 a month, or $18,000 a year. That is $80,000 a year, every year, for 3 years. My take-home pay from my restoration business, a business I built from scratch, a business that sees me working 80-hour weeks covered in grout dust and chemical stripper, is around $115,000. For 3 years, I have been living on $34,600 a year in Boston, while I subsidize 3 able-bodied adults to the tune of over $80,000 a year. I have given this family, the head, the retired patriarch, and the art gallery assistant over $241,000 of my after-tax income. I've been living like a poor college student, driving a 15-year-old truck that barely passes inspection, reheating ramen in my tiny Somerville studio, all so they could continue to live their lives of intellectual superiority, all so they could sit at this table drinking $100 wine and look at me with pity. And now, after all that, they want another $10,000. The hands. The ice in my veins is turning into steel. My father's words are still hanging in the air. If you don't like it, the door is right there. He's right. He's absolutely right. I look down at my lap. My phone is there. My thumb hovers over the screen. The mortgage payment is an automatic transfer scheduled to go out tomorrow, the 1st of the month. I set it up that way to make it easier for them, to be helpful. A new thought, cold and sharp and terrifying, slices through my mind. My father said my value is in doing. He said my role is to work. He just forgot one thing. The hands he so easily dismissed, they're the same hands that signed the checks. They're the same hands that just unlocked my banking app under the table. My father, Richard, is still looking at me with that appraising, dismissive expression. If you don't like it, the door is right there. He believes he has won. He believes he has put the hands back in their place. He takes a long, satisfied sip of the Cabernet I paid for. My thumb is shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. A white-hot, cleansing rage is coursing through me, burning away 3 years of resentment, guilt, and exhaustion. It's not just the $10,000 for Greece. It's not just the $241,000 I've already poured into this financial black hole. It's his face, the arrogance, the unearned superiority, the casual, catastrophic cruelty of his words. The hands. He's right. I am the hands. And the hands are currently holding a phone that contains all the power in this room. My thumb comes down. The app is clinical. Are you sure you want to cancel this payment of $4,200? I press confirm. A small green checkmark appears. Payment canceled. I feel a jolt, as if I've just touched a live wire. It's done. For the first time in 3 years, that money will stay in my account tomorrow. But that's not enough. That's a silent, invisible act. They won't know until the bank calls them, panicking in a few days. My father's insult was public. My response needs to be just as loud. He gave me an ultimatum. I'm going to accept his offer. I take a deep, steadying breath, and the air feels different. It feels like my air. I lift my phone from my lap and place it on the table with a quiet click, screen up. My father narrows his eyes. What are you doing, Maya? Checking on a shipment of plaster? This is a family dinner. I know what it is, I say. My voice is calm. It's so calm, it scares me. I tap my phone screen, navigating away from the app and to my contacts. I find the number for my bank, a number I know by heart, a number I've called a dozen times to confirm that their mortgage payment has gone through. I press dial. Maya, what on earth are you doing? My mother, Eleanor, says, her voice fluttering with annoyance. It's rude to make calls at the table. It's an important call, Mom, I say. Put it on speaker, my father commands, a cruel little smile on his lips. Let's all hear what's so much more important than your sister's future. Okay, I say. I press the speakerphone icon. The room is suddenly filled with the tinny, generic hold music of a major financial institution. Chloe's eyes widen. Maya, this is really childish. Are you trying to make a point? I am. The music stops. A cheerful, robotic voice chimes, "Thank you for calling Commonwealth Trust Bank. Your call is important to us. Please listen to the following options." My father is no longer smiling. His face is a mask of confusion. My mother looks at him, then at me. "Please say or enter your account number," the robot continues. I pick up my phone and type in the 12-digit number from memory. "Thank you. Connecting you to the next available agent." The silence at the table is absolute. The only sound is the click, click, click of my mother's fork as she nervously taps it against her plate. Chloe is frozen, her $10,000 Greece trip smile completely gone. "This is Lisa at Commonwealth Trust. I have your account pulled up, Miss Martin. How can I help you tonight?" I lean forward. I look directly at my father. "Hi, Lisa," I say, my voice clear and steady. "I need to cancel a recurring automatic transfer. Not just the next payment, I need to cancel the entire series, effective immediately." "Okay, I can help you with that," Lisa says, her chipper, professional voice cutting through the stunned atmosphere. "Which transfer would you like to cancel?" My father's face has gone pale. My mother's hand is at her throat. I hold my father's gaze. "The one for $4,200, I say. Account ending in 5582.
The recipient is listed as Richard Martin Mortgage Account. The bank agent, Lisa, ever the professional, has no idea she just lit the fuse on a bomb. "Okay, Miss Martin," she chirps from the speakerphone. "I have that recurring $4,200 payment canceled. It is now fully deleted from your automatic schedule. Will there be anything else I can help you with tonight?" The silence that follows her question is the most profound silence I have ever heard. It's a vacuum. "No, Lisa," I say, my voice still perfectly level. "That will be all. Thank you for your help." I end the call. The beep of the disconnected line is the starting gun. You can't." My mother, Eleanor, is the first to speak. Her voice is a thin, reedy whisper, her face as white as the linen tablecloth. "Maya, you can't do that. Tell her, Richard, tell her she can't do that." My father, Richard, slams both his hands, pale and soft, onto the table. The half-full wine glasses jump, spilling crimson drops on the white cloth. "You ungrateful little," he roars, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. He visibly chokes on his own rage, sputtering, You would dare humiliate me like this, after everything we've given you. This house? This house?" I ask, and I'm standing up now. I don't remember deciding to, but my chair is scraping back. The ice in my veins is making me feel incredibly tall. This house that I've been paying for? This house that has cost me $241,000 over the last 3 years? "That's a lie," Eleanor shrieks, finding her voice. You were helping. It was temporary. You were supposed to help. That's what family does. You can't just stop." "I can," I say. I pick up my purse from the floor and sling it onto my shoulder. Apparently, I'm just the hands. I'm the worker. My only value is in doing. Well, I'm done doing this. But what about Greece?" Chloe wails. It's so predictable, so perfectly her, that I almost laugh. Her face is a mess of confusion and panic. "What about my archival trip, Maya? You can't. The 10,000. How am I supposed to?" "I guess you'll have to figure that out, Chloe," I interrupt. "Maybe you can get a job. I hear the head is very good at thinking. Think your way into $10,000. Or you could try using your hands for something other than typing." "You are not to speak to your sister that way," my father bellows, jabbing a finger at me. "You are ending this right now. You will call that bank back, you will apologize, and you will reinstate that payment. I am still your father, and you will know." I say it,
and the word just hangs there. It's a full sentence. It's an iron wall. No, he repeats, his voice dripping with disbelief. No, I'm not calling them back. The payment is canceled. The subscription to your lifestyle is over. Let me give you the hands, a little financial breakdown, since the heads seem to struggle with basic math. I'm walking toward the front door. They're scrambling, following me, their napkins still clutched in their hands. My business brings in about $115,000 a year, before taxes, I say, my voice ringing out in the high-ceilinged foyer. You, all three of you, have been costing me over $80,000 a year. That means I have been living on less than $35,000 a year, in Boston. I've been living on poverty wages, driving a truck that's a death trap, so that you can sit in this house, drink $100 wine, and insult the very work that pays for it all? I reach the front door. I put my hand on the ornate brass knob, one I personally stripped and re-lacquered 2 summers ago, for free, of course. The mortgage is due tomorrow, I say, turning to face them. They look pathetic. 3 panicked, wide-eyed aristocrats who just saw the guillotine. That's $4,200. You have about 12 hours to figure it out. I'd suggest the head and the retired patriarch put their brilliant minds together. Or maybe Mom can sell some art. Maya, honey, please, my mother begs, her voice cracking, tears welling. You're being dramatic. We can talk about this. Don't do this to us. We'll lose the house. We'll be homeless. Then you'll have to find housing you can afford, I say, my voice devoid of all emotion. Employment is still an option. I hear it's quite popular among people who need money. I open the door. The cool night air hits my face, and it smells like freedom. You were right, Dad, I say, looking him dead in the eye. I didn't like my role, so I'm taking your advice. I step outside. The door is right there, I say, and I pull it shut behind me, the click of the latch echoing their stunned silence. I'm halfway to my truck before the adrenaline fades, replaced by a terrifying, giddy, nauseating wave of anxiety. My hands are shaking so hard, I can barely get the key in the ignition. What have I just done? My hands were shaking so hard on the steering wheel that I was worried I'd get pulled over. The old truck, my 15-year-old rust bucket, rattled and groaned as I accelerated away from their perfect tree-lined street in Chestnut Hill. This truck has been a source of quiet shame for me. It's unprofessional. It squeals. But tonight, it felt like a chariot. It was my getaway car, and every clanking sound from the engine was the sound of my escape. I hadn't even made it to the Charles River before my phone, plugged into the charger on the passenger seat, began to have a complete electronic seizure. The screen lit up, a frantic strobe light in the dark cab. Text, text, missed call, text. It was amazing how quickly their shock had turned into a coordinated digital assault. I glanced at the screen at a red light. Mom, Maya, this is hysterical. Come back and we can talk this out calmly. Mom, you are going to regret this. You're making a terrible decision based on emotion. Mom, you are tearing this family apart. Is that what you want? Dad, get back to this house now. This is not a request. Dad, you have made a grave miscalculation, young lady. You think you can survive without your family? Dad, answer your phone. This is insubordination. And my personal favorite, from Chloe. Chloe, I cannot believe you did that. You're being so unbelievably selfish. You've ruined my trip. Chloe, this is literally my entire career. How am I supposed to go to Greece? Chloe, you're just jealous. You're jealous that I have a real future, and you're just a laborer. A laborer. The echo of my father's hands. The coordination was impressive. They'd clearly defined my role. I drove past the glittering lights of Boston, across the bridge, and into Somerville. I pulled into my usual spot behind the bakery. My apartment is a 600-square-foot studio above the bakery. It's not glamorous. It smells faintly of yeast and sugar at 5 a.m., and the rest of the time,
It smells like the turpentine and wood stains I use for my smaller projects. I climbed the narrow stairs, my work boots heavy on the wooden treads. I walked into my space. It's one room, crammed with books on architectural history, drying racks for varnish trim, and a small functional kitchen. My own bills were in a neat pile on my desk. My phone was still buzzing, a furious, trapped animal in my pocket. I pulled it out. 14 missed calls, 32 text messages. I held my thumb over the Do Not Disturb button, and for a second, a cold, sharp spike of guilt hit me. It was a lifetime of conditioning. You're the responsible one. You fix things. Don't make a scene. Don't let them down. What if they are homeless? What if this actually destroys them? And then I looked at my own hands. The hands. They were stained. The knuckles were red and raw. They were tired, but they were strong. They had built a business. They had supported 4 adults. I thought of my father's face, twisted with rage. I thought of my sister's casual, cruel dismissal. A laborer. The guilt vanished. It didn't just fade, it was incinerated. I pressed the button. Silence. The sudden, absolute quiet was deafening. My apartment, my sanctuary, was finally mine again. The electronic leash was cut. I walked to my small kitchen, opened a cabinet, and pulled out a bottle of very good 12-year-old whiskey. The bottle I'd been saving for the day I finally signed a contract big enough to hire my first employee. Declaring my financial and emotional independence from my parasitic family felt like a much better reason to open it. I poured 2 fingers into a clean glass, the only one I owned that wasn't a jelly jar. I sat on my drafting stool, looking out the window at the quiet Summergill Street. The weight, the $80,000 a year, $241,000 total weight, it was gone. I felt it lift off my shoulders. I felt my lungs expand, and I realized I hadn't taken a full, deep breath in 3 years. I wasn't just a laborer. I wasn't just the hands. I was the foundation. And I had just walked away, leaving the entire, beautifully decorated, intellectually superior house of cards to collapse. I raised my glass to my reflection in the dark window. To the hands, I whispered, and I took a long, slow sip. The whiskey burned, but it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. The war wasn't over. I knew that. Tomorrow, the real fallout would begin.
Not to an alarm, but to the smell of the bakery downstairs firing up its ovens. It's a warm, sweet smell of yeast and cardamom, and it's usually my signal to drag myself out of bed and into the shower before heading to a job site. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of the bakers working. My phone was on my nightstand, still on Do Not Disturb. The screen was dark. I felt a pang of that familiar, conditioned anxiety. What if there's an emergency? But I squashed it. I was the emergency. I was the one who had finally been rescued. I sat up, the whiskey from last night a dull throb behind my eyes, and picked up the phone. I tapped the screen. The lock screen was a catastrophic mess. 47 missed calls, 82 new text messages, all from 3 people, Richard, Eleanor, and Chloe. I made coffee, good coffee, the expensive kind I usually rationed. I sat at my drafting table, the sun just starting to hit the rooftops across the street, and I read the messages. It was like sifting through the emotional debris of a shipwreck. They fell into 3 distinct, predictable categories. First, the guilt trips. Maya, I didn't sleep all night. Your father is beside himself. How could you be so cold? We are your family. We'll be on the street. Is that what you want on your conscience? Second, the threats. You have 24 hours to fix this. I am not joking. You have breached a family trust. This is a betrayal. You will find yourself very, very alone, Maya. You need us more than you know. And third, the panicked, hysterical begging. You've already ruined the Greece trip. I had to email Professor Albright and say I had a family emergency. It was humiliating. You owe me $10,000. I don't care how you do it, but you owe me. I sipped my coffee and felt nothing. Not anger, not guilt, just a vast, empty calm. The threats were hollow, the guilt was counterfeit, the begging was pathetic. There was only one person I wanted to talk to. I scrolled through my contacts and hit Ben, my older brother, the real smart one. He'd seen the family dynamic for what it was when he was 20 and had taken a job as a park ranger in Wyoming. He'd never come back. Our parents dismissed him as a drifter who was wasting his education, but Ben was the only one of us who was truly free. He picked up on the third ring, his voice gravelly. "Maya, it's 6 a.m. out here. Everything okay?" "Hey, Ben, yeah, sorry to wake you. Everything is, well, it's different." "Different how?" I could hear him sit up, the sound of a tent zipper in the background. "Is everyone okay?" "Everyone is fine, physically. I quit." "Quit your job? I thought your business was—" "No," I said. "I quit them. I quit the family. I cut them off." There was a long silence on the line. Ben knows our family. "Okay," he said slowly. "What finally did it? Did Chloe ask for a new car?" "Worse, a $10,000 research trip to Greece." 10 grand. He let out a low whistle. "Jesus, well, good for you. It's about time. I'm proud of you, Maya. That's a lot of money to say no to." "Ben," I said, my voice quiet, "that's not what I'm calling about. You think I cut them off because of the $10,000? Yeah?" The $10,000 was just the breaking point. It was the straw. It wasn't the load. "Maya, what are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "Ben, I've been paying their mortgage for 3 years." "What?" His voice changed. The sleepiness was gone, replaced by a sharp edge. "What do you mean, their mortgage? That house in Chestnut Hill?" "Yes." "The full mortgage?" "Yes. $4,200 a month for 36 months straight." "Holy, Maya, that's over $150,000. I could hear him doing the math, and his shock was the first real validation I'd had. "That's not all," I said, and I pulled out my ledger, the one I kept for my business, the one that had a grim little tab labeled Family. "I paid the property taxes, twice. That's $24,000. I paid for their groceries, utilities, and car insurance. That's about $18,000 a year. And I've paid for all of Chloe's academic extras, which total, around $15,000. I looked at the final number at the bottom of the spreadsheet. "Ben," I said, my voice shaking just a little, "it's $241,000. I've given them almost $250,000. Absolute, dead silence. I could hear the wind on his end of the line, buffeting the microphone. He wasn't calculating anymore. He was just absorbing it. "He?" Ben's voice was low, and it was furious. "He called me a drifter? He called me a failure for not contributing? And he was sucking you dry. That son of a bitch." "He called me the hands," I whispered. "He said Chloe was the head, and I was just the worker." "Maya, I'm getting on a plane." "No," I said, almost laughing. "No, don't. I'm okay. I'm actually better than okay. I needed someone else to know. I needed to know I wasn't crazy." "You're not crazy," Ben said, his voice fierce. "You're a goddamn superhero, and you're done. You hear me? You are done. Don't you dare send them another cent. Let them burn." Hearing that from him, the original escapee, it was like a shot of steel. My resolve, which had been 90% adrenaline, was now 100% conviction. "I'm done," I said. "I'm looking at my business accounts right now. I just got an $80,000 a year raise." "That's right," Ben said. "So what are you going to do with it, Maya? What do the hands build next?" I didn't go to the Beacon Hill job site. I couldn't. The adrenaline was still thrumming too hard, and the thought of dealing with clients and subcontractors was impossible. Instead, I went to my workshop. It's a rented garage space in Somerville, chilly, dusty, and smelling of sawdust and mineral spirits. It is my favorite place on earth.
I spent the morning with my ledgers and a notepad. That $80,000 a year raise wasn't just a number, it was a plan. It was the industrial-grade HEPA filtration system I'd been dreaming of. It was a new state-of-the-art table saw. It was a down payment on a real work truck, one with my business logo on the side. It was, for the first time, the possibility of hiring an apprentice. I was sketching out a workflow for a new project, my mind finally clear, when I heard a hesitant knock on the metal roll-up door. I froze. No one knocked here. Clients called. My landlord had a key. I opened the small side door, and my stomach dropped. It was my mother, Eleanor. She looked absurdly out of place, a fragile, expensive bird in my dusty industrial world. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat I recognized, one I had paid for last Christmas. Her hair was perfect. Her eyes, however, were red and puffy. "Maya," she said, her voice a fragile, theatrical whisper. "Thank God, you weren't answering your phone." "I was busy, Mom," I said. I didn't move from the doorway. I did not invite her in. Can I come in?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at the sawdust-covered floor. "It's cold out here." I stepped aside, and she walked in, pulling her coat tight around herself, as if the dust and hard work were contagious. She looked around at the stacks of reclaimed lumber, the shelves of solvents, the heavy machinery. Her expression was one of mild disgust. "So this is it," she said. "Your shop." "This is my shop," I said, crossing my arms. "Why are you here, Mom?" "Why am I?" She gave a short, hysterical-sounding laugh. "Why am I here? Maya, your father hasn't slept. He just sits in his study, staring at the wall. He's a broken man. What you did last night, it was an assassination." "He's upset that his ATM was shut down," I said. Eleanor flinched, as if I'd slapped her. "That is a vile thing to say. We are your family. We raised you. We paid for your college." "A state school," I cut in, "which I paid for mostly with scholarships and student loans that I am still paying off. You and Dad covered my first year's housing. That's it." She waved her hand, dismissing the facts. "You can't just count things, Maya. This isn't a transaction. This is loyalty. This is love. We were in trouble, and you helped us. That's what good daughters do." "I did help," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I helped for 3 years. I helped to the tune of $250,000. When does it stop being help, Mom, and start being exploitation?" "It's exploitation when you're appreciated for it," she cried, the tears starting to well up. This was the main event. "But you're throwing it all back in our faces, all because your father made one little comment. He was stressed. You know how he is about Chloe's career. He wants her to have every advantage." "And what about my advantages?" I asked. I stepped closer to her. "Did you ever, once, in 3 years, ask me what I was sacrificing? Did you ever ask if I was okay? You asked for $10,000 for a trip to Greece." Her face hardened. The tears stopped, her expression shifting from concerned mother to cornered aristocrat. "So this is it then," she said, her voice cold. "You're just abandoning us?" "No, I'm abandoning a bad financial arrangement." "We'll lose the house, you know," she said, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't a joke. The bank will foreclose. Your father and I will be on the street." "You won't be on the street, Mom. You'll sell the house you can't afford. You'll downsize. You'll get a condo. And you and Dad will have to get full-time jobs, like normal people, like me." She looked at me, her gaze lingering on the sawdust in my hair and the smock I was wearing. "A job," she said, her voice dripping with pity and contempt. "Yes, I suppose you would think that's the solution. You've become so hard, Maya, so cold. You're all about money now. What happened to the sweet girl who loved art?" "She's right here," I said, gesturing around the workshop.
She's just not paying for your art gallery habit anymore. Eleanor recoiled, her face pale. She clearly hadn't expected this. She'd expected the sweet girl to burst into tears, apologize, and ask how she could fix it. "I see," she said, her voice a brittle whisper. She turned and walked to the door, her cashmere coat catching on a rough-sawn piece of oak. "Your father was right. You'll regret this. When you're all alone, with all your tools, you'll realize that family is the only thing that matters." She left. She didn't slam the door. She just pulled it shut, leaving me alone in the sudden, dusty silence. My heart was hammering. That was, without a doubt, the hardest conversation of my life. But I hadn't folded. I was still standing. I looked at the sketches on my table. The HEPA filter, the new truck. My hands were shaking, but I picked up my pencil. I had work to do. The dust from my mother's visit had barely settled. I was still standing by my workbench, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. That confrontation had taken more out of me than a 12-hour day of sanding floors. I had just picked up my pencil, trying to refocus on the sketch for a new ventilation system, when my phone, which I'd left on the workbench, started to vibrate. The screen lit up. Richard Martin, my father. My stomach did a cold, sickening lurch. I'd faced down his rage. I'd just survived my mother's emotional manipulation. What was this? Tactic number 3? I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over it. I didn't have to answer. I could just let it go to voicemail. But I knew, with a weary certainty, that this was a battle I had to fight on all fronts. I had to see it through. I swiped to answer, but I didn't say anything. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to the sound of his breathing. "Maya?" he said. His voice was not the booming, furious roar from last night. It was low. It was calm. It was the voice he used to use on clients when a deal was going south. It was his let's be rational voice. My blood ran cold. This was more dangerous than his anger. "I'm here," I said, my own voice flat. Good," he said, letting out a long, paternal-sounding sigh. "Listen, your mother, she's beside herself. This whole thing has been a tremendous shock to the system. For all of us." I waited. "Look," he continued, "I know you were upset last night, and maybe I was a bit harsh. My choice of words was indelicate. You're emotional, I get it. You made your point, a very dramatic, very public point." He was managing me. He was framing my legitimate, 3-year delayed reaction as a tantrum. He was giving me an out so that I could apologize and we could all go back to the way things were. "It wasn't a point, Dad," I said. "It was a decision, a final one." "Now let's not be hasty," he said, his voice remaining perfectly smooth. "You can't just upend, everything. A family is a team. We've hit a rough patch, but we're figuring it out. And your mother and I, we've been talking all morning. We're willing to meet you halfway." "Halfway?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "What does halfway mean?" "It means we're all going to have to tighten our belts," he said, as if this was a novel idea. "Your mother is going to look for more hours at the gallery. I'm going to ramp up my job search. And in the meantime, we'll cover half the mortgage. All we need from you is the other half." He presented it like a peace treaty, a generous, kingly offer. "So," he said, "you just cover $2,100 a month. That's perfectly manageable for you, and it shows you're still part of this family. It shows you're still committed." I felt it then, a quick, sharp, and profoundly sad pang of pity. This was my father, the man I had once thought was a giant, the man who confidently navigated the world of high-end real estate, was now on the phone begging his laborer daughter for $2,100 a month. He was a sinking ship, trying to negotiate with the ocean. The pity was real, but it was just a pinprick, and right behind it was the clear, cold light of reality. $2,100 a month, I said, is $25,200 a year. That's still more than I've been living on for the last 3 years. That's still me subsidizing your life. That's not a compromise, Dad. That's just a discount on my exploitation. The silence on his end was immediate. The rational negotiator vanished, his mask falling away. When he spoke again, his voice was a low, acidic hiss. "You're a fool, Maya," he whispered. "A petulant, ungrateful fool. You think you're so independent? You think you've won something here? You've just destroyed this family. You've just burned a bridge you can never rebuild." "It wasn't a bridge, Dad," I said, and I was so tired. It was a one-way street, and I'm done driving on it. I am not paying your mortgage. Not half, not a quarter, not one more cent. Goodbye. Maya, you will regret. I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I just pressed the red end call icon with the same quiet finality as closing a business ledger. I set the phone down on the workbench and turned it to silent. I was done with them. I'd survived the rage, the guilt, and the negotiation. The war was over. Now, I had to deal with the fallout. I knew, with sickening certainty, who would be the next person to call. The one who had the most to lose and the least capability to fix it. My sister. 2 days passed in a strange, silent limbo. I went to my job sites, I met with a new client in Cambridge, I ordered a new set of Japanese chisels. I worked. My hands, the hands, were busy. The frantic barrage of texts from my family had slowed, then stopped altogether. It was an eerie quiet. I knew what it meant. The mortgage payment, due on the 1st, was now officially late. The 72-hour grace period was over. The bank wasn't just calling them anymore, it was sending automated alerts. The reality I had set in motion was no longer a theoretical threat. It was a looming, non-negotiable deadline. On Wednesday afternoon, I was in my workshop, meticulously applying a custom mixed stain to a piece of reclaimed cypress, when my phone, which I'd set to allow calls from contacts, began to ring. Chloe. I let out a long, slow breath, the scent of the oil-based stain sharp in my lungs. This was it, the final boss of the initial fallout. I wiped my stained hands on a rag, picked up the phone, and hit answer. I put it on speaker or set it on the workbench. I didn't say anything. I just went back to my staining, the rhythmic swoosh of the rag the only sound in the shop. Maya? Her voice was tiny. It was a voice I had never heard before. All the academic arrogance, the intellectual superiority, the casual cutting condescension, it was gone. She sounded like a child, a lost one. "I'm here, Chloe," I said. I know you're mad at us, at me." I kept wiping. Swoosh, swoosh. "Please, don't laugh, okay? I'm really, I don't know what to do." I stopped my work. I looked at the phone. "What do you want, Chloe?" There was a long pause, filled with a shaky, wet-sounding breath. How do you get a job?" I honestly thought I had misheard her. "What?" "A job," she whispered, as if the word itself was foreign, distasteful. "Like, a job. The bank called Dad. They're using words like delinquency and foreclosure. And Mom's just crying in her room. And Dad is he's just sitting in his office. He's not doing anything." She was panicking. And in her panic, the head of the family, the brilliant one, was calling the hands. I had to set my staining rag down. I had to sit on my stool. The sheer, staggering absurdity of the question hit me so hard, I almost did laugh. It was a cold, bitter, hysterical impulse. My 26-year-old sister, a PhD candidate at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, a woman who could interrogate the text of Athenian democracy, was asking me to explain the basic concept of employment? This was the creature I had been living on $35,000 a year to support. This was the brilliance my father was so proud of. She wasn't just unprepared, she was fundamentally non-functional. She was a bonsai tree, perfectly cultivated for one tiny, useless pot, and completely incapable of surviving in the wild. "You're a PhD candidate," I said, my voice like ice. "You're supposed to be good at research. Try researching that." "Maya, please," she wailed. "I'm scared. They're going to take the house. I don't know what to do." I sighed. The scorn was so profound it was almost pity. Almost. "You write a resume, Chloe." A resume? You mean my CV? My academic CV is 14 pages long. It lists all my... No, I cut her off. Nobody cares. A resume, 1 page. It lists your skills. Can you use Microsoft Word? Can you answer a phone? Can you type faster than a sleeping person? I guess. I don't have any skills. "Then you'd better figure some out," I said. "You go on websites, LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster. You look for entry-level jobs, administrative assistant, receptionist, data entry, barista." The silence on her end was a gasp. "A barista? Maya, I can't be a barista. I'm a classics scholar." "Scholars don't get paid, Chloe. Baristas do. You need money. You don't have the luxury of intellectual pride right now. Your family is about to be homeless because your father lost his job 3 years ago and was too arrogant to get a new one." But what about my trip to Greece?" she whispered. And that was the line. "Your what?" "The trip. I already paid the $1,000 deposit on my emergency credit card." She had an emergency credit card for an art trip while I was patching the tires on my 15-year-old truck. That was it. The last shred of pity, of sisterly concern, evaporated. "Madison, that is not my problem anymore," I said, my voice final. "You made that decision. You have a PhD in thinking. It's time to think your way out of this. You have a $1,000 credit card bill and a $4,200 mortgage payment due. I suggest you start applying for that barista job. I hear they're always hiring." I hung up. I didn't wait for a reply. I picked up my staining rag. My hands were steady again. The scorn was gone, replaced by a cold, hard focus. I had work to do. They were on their own. The real question was, would they sink? Or would they, for the first time in their lives, actually learn to swim? 2 weeks went by. 2 weeks of the most profound, productive silence I have ever experienced. The constant buzzing anxiety that had been my baseline for 3 years was gone. I was just working. I finished the Beacon Hill parquet floor, and the clients were so thrilled they wrote me a check for a 20% bonus. I used that bonus, plus the first $4,200 of my raise, to finally buy the industrial-grade HEPA filtration system for my workshop. It arrived on a pallet, a massive, beautiful beast of steel and tubing. I was on a ladder, covered in grease and sweat, wrestling a heavy ventilation duct into place against the ceiling when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It was probably just a shipping confirmation. It buzzed again, a text. I grunted, secured the duct bracket, and climbed down the ladder to wipe my hands. I pulled out the phone. It was from Chloe. My first impulse was to just turn it off. I was bracing for another round of begging, another guilt trip. But the message on the lock screen was just 3 words. "Chloe, got a job, start Monday." I stared at the phone. I read the words 3 times. Got a job. It felt like a typo, like a message from an alternate universe. My sister, Chloe, the 14-page CV classics scholar, had gotten a job. I was so stunned I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was deeply suspicious. Was this a trick? A prelude to, "I got a job, now can you lend me money until my first paycheck?" But the message was just flat, a statement of fact. I wiped the grime off my thumb and texted back a single, neutral phrase. Me. "Good luck. What is it?" Chloe. "Admin assistant. A dental office in Brookline. A dental office. Filing, answering phones, scheduling root canals." The sheer mundane reality of it was staggering. I texted back, "Okay." I didn't say congratulations. I didn't say I was proud. I just went back to my ladder. Another week passed. I was working late on a Friday, finishing the installation. The filtration system hummed to life, and for the first time, the air in my workshop tasted clean, free of the fine, choking dust that had plagued me for years. My phone rang. It was Chloe. I hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello?" "Hey," she said. Her voice was thin, exhausted. "How was your first week?" I asked, putting my tools away. She let out a long, shaky sigh. "It's awful." I waited. "No, that's not true," she corrected herself. And this was new. She never corrected herself. "It's not awful, it's just work. It's boring. My boss is fine. The other women are fine. I file. I answer the phone. I say, 'Brookline Dental, how can I help you?' about 100 times a day. It's mind-numbing." "Welcome to the club," I said. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know." There was a long, awkward silence. I could hear her typing something on a keyboard. "Isla," she said, using my name, which she rarely did. I've been thinking about, that dinner." I stopped what I was doing. I know I've been, well, awful. I've been thinking about what Dad said, about the head and the hands. And I never thought about it," she said, her voice small. You just did everything. You were just Maya, the one who handled things. You paid for dinner, you paid for my books, you paid for everything. And you were always working, so it just seemed like that's what you did. I never saw it as a sacrifice. I just saw it as your job." I sat down on my stool. I didn't see you," she whispered. "I just saw the hands, too, I guess. And I'm sorry." It was the most honest, fumbling, clumsy, and real thing she had ever said to me. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was still wrapped up in her feelings, her realization, but it was there. "I get paid next Friday," she said, rushing to fill the silence. It's not much, $31,000 a year, after taxes." I did the math. She was now living on less than I had been. "Ela," she said, her voice profoundly embarrassed. Can you tell me, how do you budget? Not for money, just can you tell me how? I have my first paycheck, and I have to give most of it to Mom and Dad for groceries, but I also have my credit card bill. How do you make it work?" She wasn't asking for a fish. She was asking me, the hands, how to fish. I was silent for a long time, just listening to the hum of my new filtration system. "Get a notebook," I said, my voice rough. "Write down every single thing you buy. Every coffee, every bus pass, everything. That's step 1. We can talk about spreadsheets next week." A notebook? "Okay," she said, sounding relieved. "Okay, I can do that. Thank you, Maya." "I have to go, Chloe." "Yeah, okay, me too." She hung up. I sat in my clean, quiet workshop for a long time. My sister was working. My sister had apologized. My sister was trying. It was a glimmer, a tiny, fragile spark in the dark. But the house was still in foreclosure. And my father? My father, the patriarch, the one who had spoken the insult, he was still silent. It was another month. A month where, for the first time, my phone didn't ring with a new crisis. Chloe and I had exchanged a few brief texts. One was a picture of the spreadsheet she'd built with categories for rent, groceries, and student loans, and a one-word question. "This." I'd texted back, "Good. Now add a savings line, even if it's $20. The silence from my father, however, was total. I knew the house was at its breaking point. The bank's letters would be turning from bright red to a stark legal document white. The short sale or foreclosure auction was imminent. They were, in no uncertain terms, at the end of the line. I was at my workbench, finalizing the design for my first big independent project, restoring the entire library of a Gilded Age mansion in the Back Bay. It was a $50,000 contract. It was a company maker. It was the kind of work I'd only dreamed of. I was sketching the joinery for a custom-milled piece of mahogany when my phone, silent on the table, lit up with his name, Richard Martin. My stomach didn't just drop, it evaporated. This was it, the final desperate plea, the last stand of the patriarch. I steeled myself for the rage, the negotiation, the guilt, the final apocalyptic attempt to pull me back down. I wiped my hands on my apron, a new one, thick canvas, with my own company logo embroidered on the chest. I answered the call. I'm here. There was a long pause. I heard him take a shaky breath. Maya, he said. His voice.
I start on Monday. It's a logistics coordinator at a shipping warehouse out in Revere. It's steady work. It has benefits. A warehouse in Revere. The man who used to sell multi-million-dollar penthouses in Beacon Hill was going to be coordinating truck manifests in Revere. He wasn't a consultant. He wasn't launching a venture. He had a job. Dad, I said, and my throat was tight. That's good news. I'm happy for you. That's not why I called, Maya, he said, and I could hear him struggling, the words catching in his throat. I needed to... God, he stopped. I needed to say, he began again, what I said at that dinner about your hands, about you being a worker. I closed my eyes. It was a monstrous thing to say, he whispered. It was the words of a weak, terrified old man. And I am so sorry. I gripped the edge of my workbench. The scent of wood shavings and oil filled my lungs. When I lost my business, Maya, I lost me. I was nothing, a failure. And you weren't. You were building something. You were working. You were succeeding. You were providing. You were everything I wasn't. And I didn't just resent you for it, Maya. I was jealous of you. You were the one holding this family together. And I hated you for it because it meant I wasn't. A single hot tear rolled down my cheek and splashed onto the mahogany sketch, smearing the pencil. I called you the hands to make myself feel big, he said, his voice thick with shame. To make your success feel small, because I felt so pathetically small. It was poison, Maya. I was poison, and I am so deeply, profoundly sorry. For that and for the money, for taking it, for just expecting it, for letting you sacrifice your life for my pride. I couldn't speak. I was choking on it. This was the one thing I had never, ever expected to hear. Not, I'm sorry you were upset. Not, I'm sorry we're in trouble. But I'm sorry I hurt you. And I know why I did it. We're losing the house, he said, his voice flat now, factual. It's over. We're doing a short sale. Chloe's paycheck and mine, it's not enough. It'll destroy my credit, but it's what's happening. What will you do? I whispered. We found a rental, a 2-bedroom apartment in Medford. It's small, but it's what we can afford on our own. Chloe's moving in with us to help with the rent. He was crying now. I could hear it, a quiet, broken sound. I'm not asking you for money, Maya, he said, pulling himself together. I will never ask you for money again. I swear on my life. I couldn't start this new job. I couldn't move on until I told you that. You deserve to hear that. I am so proud of you, Maya. Not just for your work, but for standing up to me. He hung up. I stood there, phone in my hand, in the middle of my workshop. The hum of the EPA filter was the only sound. I wasn't just crying. I was sobbing.
a deep, wrenching, guttural sobs that came from my boots. The $241,000 was gone. The house was gone. The patriarch was gone. And in his place was just my dad, a man with a new job in a small apartment. The weight of their survival was finally off my shoulders. But the $250,000 weight of needing his approval, I hadn't even known I was carrying it. And he had just lifted that too. I was free, in every way a person can be. I wiped my face with my dusty apron. I looked at the $50,000 design on my table. I picked up my pencil. The hands had work to do. But this time, it was all for me. After I hung up with my father, I didn't work. I couldn't. The emotional catharsis was too total. I just sat on my stool in the clean, quiet air of my workshop, and I let the silence settle. The phone, for the first time in my adult life, was just a piece of technology. It was no longer a bomb, no longer a leash. It was just quiet. I went home. I slept for 10 straight hours, a deep, dreamless sleep, and woke up feeling light. The first thought in my head wasn't, I need to check my account to make sure the mortgage transfer is covered. It was, the library project needs a custom blend of shellac. That $80,000 a year raise wasn't just a number anymore. It wasn't just a filtration system or a new set of chisels. It was fuel. It was rocket fuel. And I was standing on the launch pad. For the next week, I worked on the Back Bay Library project during the day, my hands and mind completely absorbed. I was restoring the intricate Gilded Age plasterwork, matching the original 1890s formula. I was happy. At night, I didn't go home to my studio. I stayed in my workshop. I spread out new, clean sheets of drafting paper on my workbench next to my project ledgers and my bank statements. My real bank statements, the ones that now showed a balance that was climbing at a shocking, exhilarating rate. This was no longer about just being a one-woman show. This wasn't Maya Martin, restoration specialist. That was the name of a survivor. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building. I uncapped a fresh pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, Martin Historical Design. A firm. A real firm. The $50,000 contract for the library had given me a taste of something more. It wasn't just the work. It was the scale. I wanted more. I wanted the big projects, the city contracts, the churches, the historical landmarks, the projects my old bosses were too clumsy or too corporate to bid on. And I realized, standing there under the bright fluorescent lights, that the only thing that had ever been holding me back was the $80,000 anchor I'd been dragging. I sketched it out. Phase 1, the foundation. Hire an apprentice. I was turning down work. Small, profitable jobs I just didn't have the hands for. I needed an apprentice, someone I could train, someone to handle the prep and finishing while I focused on the high-skilled joinery and plaster. The truck, my 15-year-old rust bucket, was officially retired. I was going to buy a new, heavy-duty cargo van, not lease, buy, with Martin Historical Design on the side in clean, gold leaf lettering. The credit line. I was going to walk into Commonwealth Trust, the same bank I'd called to cancel my father's mortgage, and I was going to apply for a business line of credit, based on my own contracts, my own revenue, and my own perfect credit score. This would let me bid on the big projects, the ones that required massive outlays for materials. Phase 2, the expansion. A real office. I'd rent the unit next to my workshop, not for work, but for business. A clean space with a desk, a drafting table, and a conference table where I could unroll 10-foot-wide blueprints and meet with architects in city historical commissions. Specialization. I would pivot. Not just restoration. I would specialize in historically accurate fabrication, recreating what was lost. That's where the real money and the real artistry was. I stepped back from the workbench, my heart pounding. This was a blueprint, a real, actionable plan, and all was possible. It was right there. And that's when the terror hit. It was a new kind of terror, colder and sharper than anything I had felt with my family. Before, I was afraid of their disapproval. I was afraid of their anger, their guilt. I was afraid of letting them down. This was the terror of the high wire. There was no net. If I hired an apprentice, I was responsible for their paycheck, their livelihood. If I bought that truck, it was my name on the loan. If I took out a line of credit and a project went bad, it was my firm that would fold. It was my reputation that would be destroyed. I had spent 3 years being the foundation for a house of cards. Now I was the foundation for a skyscraper, and the fall was 1,000 feet. I looked at my hands, the hands. They were stained with mahogany. A small cut on my knuckle was healing. They weren't shaking. I picked up the pen, and underneath Martin Historical Design, I wrote, Phase 1, begin tomorrow. Tomorrow wasn't a single day. It was a single act. The very next morning, I walked out of my apartment, got into my rattling 15-year-old truck, and drove not to a job site, but to a dealership. I traded in the rest bucket for what they gave me, $800, barely scrap, and I signed the papers for a brand new, white, high-roof cargo van. The loan was for $45,000, a 60-month term under my new business name. My hand was shaking as I signed. It was the single largest purchase of my life, a terrifying anchor of debt. But 2 days,
Not an apprentice, but a restoration technician. His name was Leo, a 22-year-old kid fresh out of the North Bennett Street School, Boston's legendary trade institution. He was young, energetic, and most importantly, he was passionate. He didn't see hands as a pejorative, he saw the craft as an art. When he saw my workshop, his eyes went wide. This is legit, he'd breathed. With Leo handling prep and finishing, I was suddenly free. Free to think, free to plan, and free to finish. Today was the final walkthrough for the Back Bay Library, the $50,000 contract I'd signed just before the family implosion. This was the first project completed entirely under the new banner. Leo and I had spent the last 2 days just cleaning. We'd vacuumed every speck of dust, polished every piece of brass, and let the final coat of beeswax and lemon oil cure. I was nervous. My heart was hammering. This wasn't just a job, it was my new firm's proof of concept. Mrs. Halloway, the owner, a woman in her 70s with a formidable old Boston elegance, met me in the foyer. "Well, Ms. Martin," she said, her voice neutral, "shall we see it?" I nodded, my throat dry. I pushed open the massive 12-foot mahogany pocket doors. The room glowed. It was the only word for it. The 3-story parquet and mahogany library, which had been dull, water-stained, and covered in a century of grime, was now a shining jewel box. The afternoon sun streamed through the newly restored lead glass windows, hitting the parquet floor, a floor I had painstakingly pulled up, planed, and relaid piece by piece. It shone like a sheet of dark polished glass. The intricate plasterwork on the ceiling, which I'd recast from a single surviving fragment, was perfect. The air didn't smell like solvents or dust. It smelled of beeswax, lemon oil, and the thousands of old, respected books that lined the shelves. Mrs. Halloway didn't walk in. She just stopped. Her hand, frail and adorned with an imposing sapphire, went to her mouth. She was silent for a full minute. I just waited, my hands clasped so tightly behind my back my knuckles were white. She finally moved, walking slowly to the grand fireplace. She ran her fingers over the carved mantelpiece, a piece I had spent 40 hours rebuilding from what was essentially a pile of splinters. "My God," she whispered, "it's not just restored, Ms. Martin, it's alive. It's exactly as my grandmother described it to me. I never thought I would see it like this again." She turned to me, and her sharp, neutral eyes were shining with tears. Your artistry," she said, her voice thick, "is simply breathtaking. Artistry. Not work, not labor, not hands." She handed me an envelope, the final payment.
And a bit extra for the sheer pair you took. You didn't just fix our library, my dear. You honored it. I walked back to my new van, the envelope in my hand. Inside was the final check for $25,000 and a second check marked bonus for $10,000, the exact amount my sister had demanded for her trip to Greece. The irony was so perfect, so thick, I had to lean against the side of the van just to breathe. I drove back to the workshop. Leo was whistling, organizing the new custom-built tool racks. I went into the unit I'd just rented next door, my new, clean, quiet office. I sat at my new desk. I opened my mobile banking app and deposited the checks. I stared at the balance in my business account. It was a number that made me feel dizzy, a number that was, for the first time, real. This was the validation. This was the proof. But as I looked at the number, the thrill of the $50,000 project was already fading, replaced by a new, sharper hunger. This was one house, one wealthy client. It was private. I wanted more. I opened my laptop. I went to the City of Boston's procurement portal, the place where the massive corporate construction firms bid on public work. I'd always been too small, too scared, too undercapitalized to even look. I filtered by historical preservation. A new listing posted just that morning flashed on the screen. My breath caught in my throat. Request for proposal, the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, interior woodwork and plaster restoration, North Market Building. Faneuil Hall, the Faneuil Hall. This wasn't a private library. This was a public landmark. This was the heart of the city. This was a project that would be seen by millions. This was the kind of project that would make Martin Historical Design a name. My hands, the hands, were shaking, but not from fear, from ambition. I clicked Download RFP. Downloading the Faneuil Hall RFP was one click. Reading it took 3 days. It was a 200-page monster of municipal code, architectural specifications, material requirements, and insurance bond prerequisites. This wasn't a job. It was an invasion. Bidding against the corporate giants, the ones with entire floors of project managers and estimators, was the single most difficult head work I had ever done. For 2 straight weeks, I didn't sleep. I lived in my new, clean, quiet office, surrounded by blueprints, historical archives I'd pulled from the Boston Public Library, and a wall of spreadsheets. I was calculating the linear foot cost of custom milling 200-year-old growth pine. I was projecting the precise labor hours for recasting 30 dozen 40-pound plaster ceiling medallions. I was building a 30-page logistics and safety plan. This was it. This was the intersection of the hands and the head. I was doing the intellectual work my father had once revered, but I was doing it with the practical, grounded knowledge of the materials that only a laborer could possess. I submitted the 80-page proposal binder 2 minutes before the deadline, my hands shaking. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then the email came. The Boston Historical Commission invites Martin Historical Design to present a final defense of your proposal. A defense. I walked into the boardroom at City Hall wearing my best blazer, my work-roughened hands clasped in front of me. The room was all glass and steel, overlooking the very market I was bidding on. I was at a 40-foot table facing a panel of 8 people, architects, city historians, budget directors, and a woman who was the head of the entire historical commission. I was by 20 years the youngest person in the room. I presented my plan. I was terrified. My voice shook for the first 2 minutes, and then I saw them looking at my hands, resting on the table. And I remembered. A man from the budget office cut me off. He said, "Ms. Martin, your bid is comprehensive," and it didn't sound like a compliment, but it's 15% lower than the next closest bidder, a firm we've used for decades. Your firm is, well, it's you and 1 employee. How can you possibly guarantee the timeline or the quality on a project of this scale?
This is Faneuil Hall, not a private library. The air went out of the room. It was the kill shot, the "you're too small" question. I took a breath. I looked him in the eye. "You're right, Mr. Davies," I said, and my voice was suddenly perfectly steady. "My firm is small, and that's precisely why I'm the only one who can do this project." I slid my binder open. That 15% difference, that's your corporate overhead. That's the salary for their project manager, their VP of operations, and their estimators. My bid is lower because it's honest. It's just the materials and the labor. Because I'm not a project manager, I'm a master craftswoman. I stood up and unclasped my hands. "When you hire them," I said, gesturing toward the window, "the man you're sitting with today will never set foot in that building. He'll send a crew. When you hire me, I will be on that scaffolding with my tools every single day. The other firms see this as a contract. I see it as a trust. They want to manage this project. I want to bleed for it because my name is on the side of the van, and more importantly, my hands are on the work." I sat down. The head of the commission just stared at me. She didn't smile. She said, "Thank you for your time, Ms. Martin." I left convinced I had failed. The call came 2 days later. I was on a ladder in my workshop, organizing lumber. My phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Maya Martin." "This is Elizabeth Shaw from the Historical Commission. The board has voted unanimously the Faneuil Hall contract is yours. Congratulations." I dropped my phone. It clattered to the concrete floor. I just grabbed the ladder rung, my knees weak. I hung there 10 feet off the ground and just cried. 3 weeks later, 5 a.m., the city is still dark. I park my new clean van, the one with the gold leaf lettering, on the empty cobblestone street. I unlock the massive iron gate to the North Market building. It's roped off from the public. It's just me. I walk into the center of the Great Hall, a cavernous 2-story cathedral of American history. The air is cold, smelling of 200 years of dust, old wood, and the faint, salty tang of the nearby harbor. I stand in the middle of the empty, silent floor, and I look up.